everyone. We're the Wellheads and Fountains team. My name is Victoria Sarambana. I'm a civil engineering major.
My name's Alexander Reka. I'm a robotics major.
I'm Jeevan Bayless. I'm a mechanical engineering major.
And I'm Tanner Smith. I'm a chemical engineering major.
To look at what we're talking about in our presentation today, first we're going to talk about early history of water provision in Venice. Then we're going to get into our talking about wellheads and then talking about fountains.
So here we have a quote that basically explains the entire problem of our project. And this quote translates to, Venice is in water but has no water. And to explain this, basically, for a city that is surrounded entirely by water, there's no drinking water. And so early Venetians had to rely on barges to transport water from the mainland to Venice itself, and they also had to rely on rain catchers and sand filters in order to help purify and gather more of this water. However, this is a very expensive and time-costly process, so they had to come up with something better. So introducing the Wellheads of Venice. And the Wellheads of Venice allowed for the long-term survival as this allowed Venetians to very efficiently capture and purify and store large amounts of rainwater. As you can see in the picture here, we have a photograph of a square with a wellhead presented, and then underneath we have a cross-section of the underlying cistern. And the way that this worked is that it would rain, the water would pool into the grates, and it would then be pulled down through the sand, which would filter out any contaminants, and then once again it would be filtered through the shaft of the well, as you can see here, which was created from a very porous stone that would filter out any sort of contaminants. So the water sitting at the bottom of the well shaft here would be very clean and very drinkable for the time. And there were many Venetian guilds that were dedicated to all aspects of the wells and wellheads themselves. There was a guild dedicated to the construction of the cistern underneath as well as the well shaft. There were guilds dedicated to the construction of the wellheads themselves and all the decoration that went into that. There were guilds responsible for filling up the wells in the case of no rain, and there was also guilds responsible for pumping the water out of the wells in case of contamination. And there were also other guilds that were just responsible for general maintenance and protection of these wells.
The wells lasted for around 800 years, and throughout this time they went through many different styles. The earliest wells were made from reworked marble from ancient Greek and Roman, mostly columns, some altars. Then the French Empire with Charlemagne started influencing the wellhead style, making more cubic wells. And then the Byzantine Empire influenced even more heavily, and the Veneto-Byzantine style came in. Then they got more ornate with Gothic. And then they slowly got simpler with the Renaissance paneling, the traditional style, the Baroque, and finally the neoclassical being the most simple cylinder. The traditional wellheads lasted from 1300s to 1600s, but have been seen from before then and after then. They've been around almost the entire time that wellheads have existed in Venice. There have also been a lot of different materials that wellheads have been made out of, but these three stone types are the most common. Istrian stone is by far the most common, with red Verona marble coming in second and white Verona marble coming in last. These wellheads eventually fell out of use when more reliable water sources and safer water sources became possible in the 19th century.
The first ever major catalog of wells in Venice was done by Alberto Rizzi in 1981. He went around and documented all of the wells. He gave them numbers and measured all their dimensions and everything associated with them. And then there have been previous WPI research teams who have also documented the wells in Venice. They were able to find 217 public wells, and they modeled their research off of Alberto Rizzi's as well. They were able to measure a lot of the damage and dimensions of the wellheads in Venice, and that is also something that we took a look at when we did our surveys. We cataloged the damage as well as all of the pre-existing information, such as their number, as well as their stone type and other things like that. We found that when we compared our data to that of the 2000 group, we found that 38% of wellheads are in worse condition than they were 20 years ago.
So a lot of the condition has gotten worse due to multiple types of damages. During our field work, we noticed there were 4 main ones: rust, graffiti, structural cracks, and growth, such as algae and moss. Rust is typically found on the lids of the lids of the wellheads because they were made of metal. There's graffiti found on quite a few wellheads that is damaging for obvious reasons, but also the chemicals used to remove the graffiti is corrosive and damaging to the wellheads. There's structural cracks, which are obviously viewable from the outside, but go deep into the wellheads. And then there's unwanted growth, such as the algae and moss, which are found on almost all of them. Through our field work and cataloging all the damage, we were able to create a restoration list, a priority list of the wellheads that we think should be fixed first. So all of our damages had different weightings, and we came up with these 2 being the wellheads that need the most restoration. They were scored 0 through 100, 0 being the worst. The one on the left here, we gave it a 1.5, one on the right, 7.5, and they're both in Castello. Like other groups have mentioned before us, we had to use the Venetian Map Explorer to plot the wellheads from previous maps. It's hard to see. Unfortunately, we can't change the color. It's green for us, but there are wellheads littered all across the map here. We've shown a few of them. If you click on them, it brings up more information, and when you click on these links, it brings you to Venepedia. We created singular and plural pages for wells and wellheads. So the wellhead singular page is detailing about the wellheads themselves, giving lots of information, whereas the wellheads gives basically a list of all of them. And we also created the individual pages. We created templates to provide information about the specific wellhead.
In 1884, the Venetian water aqueduct was constructed, and this created a line directly from the mainland straight to Venice. And this allowed for the construction of the fountains. And the fountains of Venice ended up replacing wells as the primary drinking source in Venice, and this was because the fountains provided a nearly endless source of very clean and potable water for much less effort than the wells did. And today, the public works company Veritas is the one who currently controls the main water line as well as the majority of the water distribution in Venice. And he is not here, but we would like to thank Stefano for giving us his time and expertise on this matter.
Another group that we met with to gain their information and their insight was Venice Tap Water, and we would like to thank Marco in the back for meeting with us. Venice Tap Water is an initiative that tries to raise awareness about the drinkability of the fountains of Venice, because many tourists don't know that it's potable and use bottled water instead, which creates a lot of waste. They have on their website a map of locations of fountains as well as the functionality and links to the potability tests that have been conducted before on those fountains. Marco very generously gave us the data on the locations of the fountains and the functionality of said fountains. There's also a 2014 WPI study that tested the functionality, physical condition, and dimensions of the fountains across Venice, and we used both Marco's Venice Tap Water's data as well as the 2014 study to create a basis of understanding from which to make our Survey 123. We, like the other groups and like with our wellheads, used Survey 123 to collect the data on all the fountains. This data included functionality, flow rate, and condition. We found that over half of the fountains that we were able to document were one of these 3 features, with Puglia fountains being by far the most at 75. And we discovered that 2/3 of the fountains are functional.
Like Sander mentioned, we also recorded the condition of each of the fountains in Venice and the surrounding islands. When compared to the group from 2014, as well as from Venice tap water photos, we found that only 10 of the fountains in Venice out of 228 that we were able to look at are in worse condition or have not improved since the last time they were photographed. We did also find that compared to 2014, there are more functioning fountains. There are a total of 12 that have been reactivated in Venice, and then 6 that have been shut off, so that's a net positive of 6 fountains. That being said, however, we noticed that while there are more fountains that are active, their flow rates have substantially been slowed down. Over half of them have decreased substantially since 2014.
One of the main goals of our project is promoting fountains and promoting sustainability. To do this, we created a website for fountains and an accompanying QR code that in a non-permanent manner will be attached to these fountains that tourists and other people can scan. We'll bring them to the website, and we have 2 main features on the website. The first of them is, again, linking back to Venice tap water. They have a very, very helpful interactive map where they show A, the locations of each wellhead, and B, if they work or not. So if you want to find the nearest fountain, you can open it in Google Maps, and your phone will direct you. Second part is reporting if the fountain works or not. If the fountain doesn't work, then it's not really helpful to anyone. So we have a button here where you just click the button, it brings you to a form, fill out the information. It's 2 questions: which fountain is it, and does it work? And then we will automatically be notified, so that way restoration can happen as soon as possible. Also on our website, we have links to Venipedia again. Similar to the Wellheads, we have singular and plural for fountains, and then we also created templates to list each individual fountain and give more information. They have a code and also a name associated with them. Again, similar to the Wellheads, we wanted to create a restoration list in order to figure out which ones need to be restored the most. While Wellheads only implemented damages, the fountains use damages and also additional features specific to fountains, such as the flow rate, if they worked or not, and how easy they were to use, among other things. And we used a similar scale, 0 to 100, 0 being the worst, and these were the 2 that we discovered to be the worst. They were not working, and as such had very low flow rates, non-existent flow rates, and we gave them an 11.5 and 13.05 through our algorithm.
During our meeting with Venice Tap Water, we concluded that creating a map of new potential fountain locations would be a very good idea. And the idea behind this map, as you can see, is to place a new fountain on every island within Venice that does not already have one. The purpose of this is so that nobody has to cross any bridges to gain access to a fountain. And as you can see here on the map, the red markers, those are the island fountains. So those are the highest priority ones that we feel like should get done first. And then the other markers that are marked in black, those are focused around the ACTV boat stops, so that anyone traveling within Venice through those boat stops will always have ready access to public drinking water. Okay. There's a missing slide somehow.
Question. So I'm fascinated by the sand filtering. Is there any data about do you have any data on how effective and how pure, how effective the sand filters were in actually purifying the water? And do you have any data correlating potential illnesses that were related to unpurified water?
We believe Veritas has done, they have done testing on the water coming out of both the fountains and the wells. There was one instance where they reopened an old well. I don't know how recently, but they opened up an old one that was sealed up and tested the water that supposedly hadn't been touched for a very long time, and it was still very clean for just a simple sand filtration system. And for the time, obviously, the sand filtration was very pure.
So I have a follow-up question. It seems as though each cistern was within a campo, and it served the needs of families that surrounded that campo. Do you have any data that related, statistically, to the number of people who would access pure water from that cistern?
We don't have numbers on how many people accessed certain wells, and that's very difficult to do considering so many of the wells have either turned into private property or just been removed entirely. There was a picture on one of our previous slides that showcased what we call a wellhead graveyard, where it was a museum that had a bunch of removed wellheads that were all sitting in one room, essentially. So it would be difficult to say how many people use certain wellheads.
Well, I would mean specifically at the time when they were actually being used, not currently. But, for example, in the ghetto, there are, first of all, the campo de ghetto is quite large. And there are two, I believe, two wellheads there.
I think I actually remember 3 in that area.
Is it 3? It could be 3.
I think it's 3 in that
area. I never really paid that much attention. But also, it was a very densely populated area, right? So you have lots of people living in these very tall buildings. So I'm just curious if there was some sort of analysis that was done that said, here's the concentration of people, and here's how many of these sand filters we need to make. I mean,
we did not do any analysis on that.
Not you, I meant in the past, the Venetian Republic, if the Venetian Republic did any of that.
That is not something we looked into, so I can't tell you that, unfortunately. Now that we have half the slide up, I can finish this up. And so, back to talking about the new locations for new fountains, trying to put one on every fountain, every island that does not have one. We decided to try and integrate a new design into these new fountains, as well as retrofitting old fountains with this design that you see here. And this design is based off of a regular LK water bottle filling stations, the ones you'd see in schools and airports and train stations, very recognizable. And most people know that when you see a filling station like that, you know it is clean and potable water. So we implemented this. We have a 3D design as well as a Photoshop design into these fountain designs, hopefully so that people can see these fountains and recognize that this is potable water and that they're more likely to fill up their water bottles there and hopefully reduce the amount of plastic water bottles that tourists and people in Venice are using.
Okay, so questions?
On the operating status slide, on the slide, okay. But you mentioned that 2 fountains had unknown operating status, like not on or off as unknown. What did you mean by that?
So those were fountains that we weren't able to reach or couldn't access, and we have no idea if they're operational or not.
Were you able to use census tract population data to inform your recommendations for where new wells should be placed, or if they were wellheads or whatever, fountains?
Yeah, so that is something we wanted to do. Unfortunately, with the amount of time we had here, we weren't able to, but we are recommending that a future group takes a look and sees if there's a correlation between the actual, like where Venetians are actually living and if the fountains work or not.
You mentioned that you found 3 different types of fountains. Could you just explain the differences between them? I wasn't quite able to catch that during your slideshow.
So the most common type of fountain had a line. We unfortunately can't go back because we switched computers in order to get this slide up. The most common type of fountain had a lion head on the spout, whereas the other ones were all just a metal pipe. And then it was the design, the structure of the shaft, whereas this one's square, and the second most common was circular. That was the main difference between the next two.
Did you find any correlation in the amount of damage on either a wellhead or a fountain based on where it was according to foot traffic data?
We did a lot of analysis correlating or trying to correlate foot traffic data to any kind of damage, but we found that there was no correlation or not enough data to prove that there's any correlation either way.
Okay, one more question. We'll
I really like your designs. That's very, very cool. A question, so these fountains are always on demand, or meaning you have to go and turn it on, or do they run continuously? And if so, you waste a lot of water.
So in our research, we did find a handful of fountains that were on continuously. These specifically have buttons to operate them, so they're not continuously on. And if they were retrofitted with these, or if the LK was installed on them, they wouldn't be running continuously. It would be, you would place your water bottle in there, and then it would fill up accordingly.
But I think the question is more, you walk around and you see a lot of fountains that are just on 24/7. And I understand there's a purpose for that. As a civil engineer, I thought, oh my goodness, we're treating water and putting it through the system, and then we're just letting it go. But there is a reason for doing that, correct?
There is a reason for that. The water fountains that are on continuously typically fall at the end of the line, or the end of a water line, so they don't get backed up. If they were to be on continuously, the water would get backed up in the pipes, and it would cause a bunch of issues. I don't believe they can. Once it's been, once it's out of the fountain, it's gone. Yeah.
Okay, so we'll stop here. Thanks one more to the teams.